She used to live in the 10th floor apartment just opposite mine. I saw her with my telescope, her silhouette a stark contrast against the city lights beyond. She was gorgeously beautiful, with long, raven hair that cascaded down her back like a silken waterfall, and eyes that held a depth that both captivated and unsettled me. There was something about her, a subtle disquiet, that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. But it was her charm that truly captivated me. The first time I saw her, she was standing by the window, her back to me, a cigarette dangling from her cherry-red lips. Her movements were fluid, almost hypnotic, as she inhaled, the smoke curling up like a silent prayer to the night sky. There was an air of mystery about her, a sense that she held secrets that she guarded fiercely. I couldn't help but be drawn to her, to the enigma she represented. I was a loner, a recluse who found solace in the anonymity of my cluttered apartment. My world was confined to the four walls of my haven, my only companions the books that lined my shelves and the flickering glow of my computer screen. Then she arrived, her presence like a beacon in the darkness. I started observing her, watching her from my vantage point, chronicling her daily routines. She seemed to be the perfect picture of urban sophistication. She worked in advertising, her days filled with meetings and presentations, her evenings spent at trendy bars and art galleries. She had a circle of friends, seemingly as vibrant and alluring as she was. Yet there was a hint of melancholy in her eyes, a fleeting shadow that crossed her face from time to time, a whisper of something that wasn't quite right. One day, I saw her leaving her apartment with a bouquet of lilies, white as snow, their fragrance filling the air. She carried them with a grace that seemed at odds with the somber mood she exuded. She didn't smile, she didn't look happy. She simply walked, her head bowed, the lilies casting long shadows on the pavement. I followed her, my curiosity turning into a morbid fascination. She walked towards the cemetery, a sprawling expanse of headstones and weeping willows, a place that held a strange allure for me. She stopped at a particular grave, a small, unassuming headstone, its inscription faded and almost illegible. She knelt, laying the lilies on the grave, the white blossoms contrasting with the gray stone. I watched from a distance, my heart pounding in my chest, my breath catching in my throat. She didn't stay long. She stood, her shoulders slumped, and turned to leave. I followed her, my footsteps echoing in the silence of the cemetery. I saw her enter a small, dilapidated building, its walls covered in moss and lichen, its windows boarded up. It was a mausoleum, I realized, a place for holding the dead. I stood outside, my body trembling, my mind racing with questions. What was she doing there? What secrets did the mausoleum hold? Did she have some connection to the dead? The questions gnawed at me, a relentless torment that I couldn't shake off. I had to know. I had to see. I crept inside, my footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of leaves that covered the floor. The air was thick and heavy, the smell of decay and damp earth filling my nostrils. I saw her in the distance, her back to me, her figure shrouded in the shadows. She was standing in front of a large, iron-wrought door, its surface rusted and pitted, its lock broken. She was fiddling with a key, her movements slow and deliberate. I approached her cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear her soft whisper, the words barely audible, but they echoed in the stillness of the mausoleum, sending shivers down my spine. "I'm home, my love," she whispered. Her voice was like a caress, soft and sweet, but it spoke of a darkness that I could not comprehend. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase that led to the darkness beyond. She stepped inside, the door closing silently behind her. I froze, my mind reeling. She wasn't just visiting a grave. She wasn't just paying her respects to the dead. She was going somewhere else, somewhere hidden, somewhere secret. My curiosity had turned into a morbid obsession, an insatiable thirst for knowledge that I could no longer control. I followed her. The steps were narrow and steep, the walls cold and damp. The air grew colder as I descended, the oppressive silence broken only by the sound of my own heartbeat. I could hear her ahead of me, her footsteps echoing on the stone steps, her movements slow and deliberate. Finally, I reached the bottom, my eyes adjusting to the dim light that lit the chamber. The room was vast and empty, the walls covered in faded murals depicting scenes of a forgotten past. A single candle flickered on a table in the center of the room, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. She stood in the center of the room, her hair cascading down her back, her eyes burning with an intensity that chilled me to the bone. Her gaze was fixed on the flame, her lips moving silently. "I've brought you something," she whispered, her voice echoing in the silence. She turned towards me, her face illuminated by the flickering candlelight, her eyes blazing with an unholy fire. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice a low, menacing growl. I was trapped, my heart pounding in my chest, my throat dry. My mind screamed at me to run, to escape, but my feet remained rooted to the spot. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling. She smiled, a cold, predatory smile that sent a shiver down my spine. "I am the keeper of secrets," she said. "And you have stumbled upon one that you should have left untouched." She moved towards me, her movements graceful and predatory. I knew then that I was in danger, that my curiosity had led me to a place I should never have explored. But there was something about her, something that drew me to her, something that made me want to know more. "What is it?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. She reached out and touched my face, her fingers soft and cool against my skin. "It's a story," she said, her voice a silken whisper. "A story that will change your life." She leaned closer, her breath warm on my ear. "A story," she continued, "that will haunt you forever." I closed my eyes, unable to bear the intensity of her gaze, the weight of her secrets crushing me. When I opened my eyes again, she was gone. The candle had gone out, leaving the room in darkness. I was alone, lost in the vast, silent chamber, the echo of her words bouncing off the cold stone walls. I stumbled out of the mausoleum and back into the cemetery, my legs trembling, my mind reeling. I had seen something that had shattered my reality, something that had opened a door to a world I never knew existed. I ran home, seeking refuge in the familiar confines of my apartment. But I could not escape the terror that gnawed at my soul, the haunting whispers that echoed in my mind. Her charm was never forgettable, but it had a price. And that price was my sanity. The unseen presence. Days turned into weeks, and the haunting image of her, standing in the dim light of the mausoleum, her eyes burning with an unholy fire, became a constant phantom in my mind. I tried to forget, to dismiss it as a figment of my imagination, but the truth was too real, too vivid. I avoided looking across the street, afraid of seeing her, afraid of being drawn back into that dark, forbidden world. But she was always present, a shadow lurking at the edge of my consciousness. One night, I was working late, my laptop screen illuminating my face with a pale, blue light. The silence of the apartment was broken only by the hum of the computer, the tap-tap-tap of my fingers on the keyboard. I was engrossed in a research paper, trying to escape the oppressive weight of my thoughts. The phone rang, the sound jarring in the silence. I answered, my voice raspy with disuse. "Hello?" I said. But there was only silence on the other end. "Hello?" I repeated, my voice louder, more insistent. The silence continued. Then I heard it, a soft, chilling whisper. "He's watching you," it said. The phone went dead. I stared at the phone, my hand trembling. The blood drained from my face, leaving me pale and clammy. I had heard that voice before, a cold, chilling voice that spoke of secrets and danger. The voice of the keeper of secrets. I didn't know who was watching me, but I knew that they were out there, their gaze fixed upon me, their motives shrouded in mystery. I was no longer safe in my own apartment, my haven transformed into a prison. I started noticing things that I had ignored before. Strange noises in the walls, shadows flickering in the corner of my vision, a sense of being watched. My mind, already fragile, began to unravel. I became obsessed with finding out who was watching me, who was responsible for the phone call, for the whispers in the shadows. I scoured my apartment, looking for clues, for any sign of an intrusion. But there was nothing, no sign of forced entry, no evidence of anything out of place. Yet I knew I was being watched. The feeling was like a second skin, a constant reminder of my vulnerability, of my impending doom. I went back to the cemetery, drawn back to that place of secrets and death, seeking answers to the questions that plagued me. I sat by the mausoleum, the cold stone beneath me, the silence of the place heavy and oppressive. And then I saw her, standing in the distance, her figure a dark silhouette against the setting sun. She was watching me, her eyes fixed upon me, her gaze piercing through me like a sharp blade. I wanted to run, to escape, to find refuge in the anonymity of the city. But I was frozen, my body paralyzed by fear. She approached me, her movements slow and deliberate, her long black hair flowing behind her like a dark shroud. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice a chilling whisper. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling. She smiled, a cold, predatory smile that sent a shiver down my spine. "I am the keeper of secrets," she said. "And you have stumbled upon one that you should have left untouched. What is it?" I asked, my voice barely audible. She leaned closer, her breath warm on my ear. "It's a story," she said, her voice a silken whisper. "A story that will change your life." She paused, her eyes burning into mine. "A story," she continued, her voice a chilling growl, "that will haunt you forever." She turned and walked away, her figure fading into the shadows, her words echoing in the silence of the cemetery. I was left alone, my mind reeling, my body trembling. I had seen her, the keeper of secrets, the one who had drawn me into this world of darkness, of shadows, of whispers. And I knew that I would never escape her grasp. The final revelation. The fear that had gripped me for weeks, the feeling of being watched, of being hunted, reached a crescendo. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, I couldn't escape the suffocating feeling of being trapped. I knew I had to do something, to find out what was happening, to break free from the grip of the keeper of secrets. I went back to the cemetery, to the mausoleum, to the place where I had first encountered her. I was determined to confront her, to find out what she wanted from me. I found her standing in the chamber, the dim light of a single candle illuminating her features, her eyes blazing with an unholy fire. "You're back," she said, her voice a soft, chilling whisper. "I need to know," I said, my voice trembling. "What is it you want from me?" She smiled, a cold, cruel smile that sent a shiver down my spine. "I want you to understand," she said, her voice a silken caress. "I want you to see the truth." She stepped closer, her eyes fixed upon me, her gaze piercing through me like a sharp blade. "Do you see?" she whispered. "Do you understand now?" I looked at her, my mind reeling, my heart pounding in my chest. I looked at the murals on the walls, at the faded scenes of a forgotten past. And then I saw it, a realization that hit me like a wave, crashing over me, leaving me gasping for air. The scenes in the murals were not just depictions of a forgotten past. They were fragments of a present, of a reality that was hidden from my eyes, from the eyes of everyone who didn't know the truth. The keeper of secrets was not a ghost, not a phantom, not a figment of my imagination. She was real. And she was a part of a world that existed beyond the veil of reality, a world that was hidden from the eyes of the ordinary, a world that existed in the shadows, in the silence, in the whispers. She was a conduit, a bridge between the two worlds, a guardian of secrets that were too dangerous for the ordinary to comprehend, too powerful for the ordinary to wield. And I, in my insatiable curiosity, had stumbled upon those secrets. The keeper of secrets had made me see, had shown me the truth. But the truth had come at a price I was not prepared to pay. She stepped back, her eyes glowing with an unearthly light. "You now understand," she said, her voice a low, ominous growl. "You are no longer ordinary." She turned and walked away, her figure fading into the shadows, her words echoing in the silence of the mausoleum. I was left alone, my mind reeling, my body trembling. I had seen the truth, the horrifying, terrifying truth. I was no longer ordinary. I ran out of the mausoleum, out of the cemetery, into the city, into the world that I now knew was only a facade, a veil concealing a darker, more sinister reality. I ran, but I knew that I could never escape, never outrun the truth. The Keeper of Secrets had chosen me, had marked me as her own. And I was forever bound to her, to the world of shadows, to the whispers that would forever haunt me. The final revelation had shattered my reality, leaving me lost and alone in a world that was no longer familiar, no longer safe. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that the Keeper of Secrets would always be watching, her gaze fixed upon me, her secrets a constant weight on my soul, a burden I would carry for the rest of my days. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs screamed, but I knew that I was running from something that would never be outrun, from a truth that would forever haunt me. And as I ran, I could hear her voice, soft and sweet, like a chilling whisper in the wind. "Welcome to the shadows, my love. Welcome to the world of secrets." My life was a canvas of beige and fluorescent light. High school, with its endless cycles of homework, tests, and teenage drama, felt like a suffocating cage. My solace was the woods behind our school, a wild, untamed expanse that offered a break from the mundane. It was there, in the dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy, that I found my sanctuary, a place where my anxieties and frustrations dissipated in the rustling leaves and the scent of pine. My best friend, Sarah, shared my love for the woods. We were two peas in a pod, drawn together by a shared sense of adventure and a thirst for something beyond the confines of our town. We would spend hours exploring the hidden trails, the whispers of the wind fueling our imaginations. We built forts hidden amongst the towering pines, dreamt of escaping to distant lands, and shared our deepest secrets under the watchful eyes of the ancient trees. One crisp autumn afternoon, the air thick with the scent of decaying leaves, we ventured deeper into the woods than we ever had before. A newfound sense of defiance fueled our steps, the thrill of breaking boundaries setting our hearts racing. We found ourselves in a secluded clearing, a small, forgotten meadow bathed in warm sunlight. It was an idyllic scene, an emerald oasis in the vast green sea of wilderness. Then we saw it. A car, a rusty, faded blue station wagon, sat parked haphazardly at the edge of the meadow, its windows tinted black, hiding whatever lay within. It seemed out of place, a discordant note in the symphony of the forest. We exchanged uneasy glances, our hearts pounding in our chests. "Maybe it's just a park ranger," Sarah suggested, her voice trembling slightly. "Maybe," I replied, my voice strained. "But it doesn't look like any ranger car I've ever seen." A shiver ran down my spine. The air, which had been comforting moments before, now seemed thick with a palpable tension. The whispers of the trees, the rustling leaves, they all felt imbued with a sinister undercurrent, a promise of danger lurking just beyond our sight. We both knew we should leave, but something held us back, a morbid curiosity, a need to know what lay hidden behind those tinted windows. We crept closer, our footsteps light and silent on the soft bed of leaves. The silence in the meadow was suffocating, broken only by the rhythmic chirping of crickets and the distant caw of a crow. As we approached the car, the smell hit us first. It was a metallic, sickly sweet scent, the kind that makes your stomach turn. I felt a rising panic, a primal fear that sent shivers racing down my spine. Suddenly, a movement inside the car. A shadow shifted, a dark silhouette against the tinted glass. A chill ran down my spine, my breath catching in my throat. We froze, our bodies rigid with terror, our eyes glued to the car. The shadow moved again, this time closer to the window. A hand, pale and gaunt, appeared, pushing against the glass. The feeling of dread was overwhelming, a suffocating blanket of fear that constricted my lungs. We didn't wait to see more. We turned, our legs leaden, and fled back towards the familiar path, the echoing roar of our pounding hearts filling the deafening silence. We ran, blindly, our lungs burning, our legs screaming for mercy. The memory of the car, the metallic scent, the pale hand, haunted my dreams. It became a constant, unwelcome companion, a shadow looming over my everyday life. The woods, once my haven, now felt like a place of lurking danger. The rustle of leaves, the chirping of crickets, every sound became a potential warning, a whisper of the unseen terror that haunted my every waking moment. The car was never found. The police investigation yielded no concrete leads, the case dismissed as a possible prank or a lost hiker. But the fear remained, a constant, gnawing feeling that never truly dissipated. The truth is, the forest had changed. It was no longer just a haven, a place of escape. It was now a place of secrets, a place that held a darkness I couldn't explain. It was a place where I witnessed something chilling, something that defied explanation. I felt, deep down, that the woods knew things it refused to reveal, things that continued to haunt me, to whisper in the darkness, reminding me of the unseen terror that lurks just beyond the veil of everyday life. Years passed, and I tried to put the memory of the car behind me. I graduated high school, went to college, started a career, built a life. But the experience in the woods left an indelible mark. The fear, the unease, it remained, a constant undercurrent in my life. It manifested in my anxieties, my nightmares, my constant need to be vigilant, to be aware of my surroundings. The forest, in my mind, had become a symbol of the unknown, a place where the darkness held a grip on the soul. Then, one spring day, while driving through the countryside, I saw it. A flash of faded blue, a rusting station wagon, parked in a secluded clearing, its windows tinted black. It was like a scene from a nightmare, an echo of the event that had haunted me for years. This time, I was alone, there was no Sarah by my side. The same chill I felt years ago ran down my spine, the same dread constricted my lungs. This time, I knew I couldn't just run away. I had to face my fear. I parked my car a safe distance away, my heart pounding in my chest. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and slowly walked towards the car. The closer I got, the more familiar the metallic scent became, the same sickly sweet smell that had filled the air in the woods all those years ago. I stopped a few feet from the car, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle. I was about to turn the knob, to confront the darkness that lurked within, when a cold breeze swept through the clearing. I heard the distinct sound of rustling leaves, a chorus of whispers, and a sudden, chilling realization. The forest knew. It knew I was here, it knew what I was about to do. And it wasn't going to let me in. The breeze grew stronger, the rustle of leaves intensified, and a deep, guttural growl echoed through the trees. It was the sound of a predator warning its prey, a sound that sent shivers racing down my spine. I didn't hesitate. I turned and ran, my legs pumping, my heart hammering against my ribs. I ran until I couldn't breathe, until the forest seemed to fade away, until the growl became a distant echo. I didn't look back. I knew I couldn't. I knew that the forest held secrets that were best left hidden. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the forest knew more than I could ever comprehend, and that some things are best left undisturbed. I still live with the memory of that day, with the fear that lingers in the shadows. The car in the woods, the unseen terror, it all serves as a constant reminder that the world is a place of hidden dangers, a place where the unknown lurks just beyond the veil of everyday life. The forest, in my mind, will always remain a place of both beauty and fear, a place where the whispers of the wind hold secrets I am not meant to know. I no longer live in the shadow of the forest, but the forest, in its own way, still lives in me. It's a constant reminder that there are things in this world we can never fully understand, things that lurk in the darkness, waiting for the opportune moment to reveal themselves. It's a reminder that sometimes, the best way to deal with fear is to simply run. To run until the shadows fade, until the fear becomes a distant memory, a whisper on the wind. But sometimes, the whispers remain. They linger in the quiet corners of your mind, a constant reminder of the things you can never truly escape. They are a testament to the fact that the unknown is always present, always watching, always waiting. They are a reminder that the forest knows, and that sometimes, the forest is not your friend. My name is Kethy, and I reside in a modest apartment with 2 roommates. Our home is situated in a peaceful residential area, devoid of any notable peculiarities. However, there's one feature that sets our abode apart: the towering trees that cast their long shadows upon our building. Initially, these trees were merely a pleasant sight, providing a verdant backdrop to our daily lives. But as days turned into nights, I began to notice something amiss. An unsettling feeling crept over me whenever I ventured near the windows overlooking the trees. It was as if unseen eyes were watching me, studying my every move. At first, I dismissed it as my imagination playing tricks on me. However, as the nights wore on, the sensation persisted. I started to feel a growing sense of unease, as if something sinister lurked in the shadows of those towering giants. One evening, as I was working late at my desk, I couldn't resist the urge to glance out the window. Darkness had enveloped the neighborhood, casting an eerie glow upon everything in sight. And there, perched among the branches of one of the trees, I saw a pair of glowing eyes staring right at me. Terror surged through my veins as I stumbled backward, my heart pounding against my ribcage. I fumbled for my phone and dialed my roommates, but they didn't answer. Fear gnawed at me, and I knew I had to escape. Grabbing a handful of belongings, I rushed out of my apartment and into the cold night air. As I ran, I could see the eyes still watching me, their gaze unwavering. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine as I realized that whatever was in those trees was not letting me go. I stumbled through the deserted streets, the sound of my own footsteps echoing in the silence. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat, and every creak and groan made me jump out of my skin. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed, hunted. Finally, I reached the safety of a nearby store and collapsed on the floor, panting heavily. As I tried to regain my composure, I glanced out the window and saw them again. The glowing eyes were gone, but I could see the outline of a shadowy figure lurking among the trees, watching me with malevolent intent. I knew then that I couldn't stay in that apartment any longer. The trees, once a source of comfort, had become a symbol of terror. I packed my belongings and left that night, never to return. The days that followed were a blur of fear and paranoia. I couldn't escape the feeling that the trees were still watching me, their unseen eyes following my every move. I started to see them everywhere I went, even in the most innocuous of places. I sought solace in therapy, hoping to understand the trauma I had endured. Slowly but surely, I began to piece together the truth. The trees, I realized, were not merely inanimate objects but sentient beings, ancient and malevolent. They had chosen me as their target, drawn to my fear and vulnerability. As time passed, the intensity of the trees' presence gradually diminished. I learned to shield my mind from their influence, to find strength in the face of their malevolence. But I knew that the trees would always be there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for me to slip up. I have since moved to a new home, far away from the haunted apartment and its malevolent guardians. Yet, even now, I can still feel their presence on the edge of my awareness. They are a constant reminder of the darkness that lurks within the world, the unseen forces that prey on our fears and vulnerabilities. But I am not afraid. I have faced the darkness and emerged from it stronger. The trees may watch me, but they cannot break me. I am Kethy, and I am a survivor. Ding dong! Ding dong! Ding dong! 3 disturbing rings. Unsettling pauses in between each one, about 5 seconds each. This was the first time all of this creepy shit happened, and at the time, was what I had prayed would be the one, and only time. But of course, I was wrong. It was late. Past midnight. I was curled up on the couch, a half-finished mug of tea in my hand, lost in the pages of a worn Agatha Christie novel. The house was quiet, the only sound the distant hum of the refrigerator. The front door echoed with the 3 insistent rings, breaking the spell of the cozy night. A shiver ran down my spine. It felt wrong. My apartment was on the 2nd floor, and the front door was accessible only by a flight of stairs. I lived alone, and I was certain I hadn't invited anyone over. My heart pounded in my chest as I cautiously walked towards the window, peering through the blinds. Nothing. No one. Just the empty street bathed in the pale glow of the streetlights. It was an eerie sight, the quiet street now seemingly amplified by the persistent ringing at my door. I was paralyzed with fear, my hand hovering over the phone, my finger poised on the 9 to dial for help. Ding dong! Ding dong! Ding dong! The rings came again, 3 times, the disturbingly long pauses between each one. I bit my lip and whispered a silent plea, hoping that whoever was out there would just go away. But they didn't. I stood there, frozen, the image of the empty street etched into my mind. I finally forced myself to move, to turn away from the window, and walk back to the couch, the tea forgotten, the book abandoned. My mind raced with possibilities, none of them comforting. Then, the phone rang. "Hello?" I answered, my voice trembling. "Hey, it's me, Emily. I need your help. Can you come down now?" My friend Emily's voice was a welcome relief. I was about to tell her the story of the mysterious rings when a thought struck me. I was convinced that whoever was knocking at my door was not an ordinary visitor. Perhaps it was something else entirely, something beyond my understanding. "Emily, I can't. Something's going on here. Someone's at the door. I think they're trying to get in. I need you to come over." Emily was silent for a moment. I could hear her breathing heavily. "What's happening, Sarah? Are you okay?" I explained the bizarre series of events, the 3 disturbing rings, the empty street, the fear I felt. "I'm coming. Don't open the door. I'll be there soon." Her voice was tense, laced with worry. I hung up the phone, the reassurance of her voice a fragile shield against the growing unease. Now, I really did feel alone, more alone than ever. That night, I sat on the couch, watching the street, the phone clutched in my hand. The ringing ceased, replaced by a heavy silence, a quiet that felt even more unsettling. I didn't dare go to sleep, not until Emily arrived. Finally, I heard the clatter of a key in the lock downstairs. Emily's voice, a welcome wave of comfort, washed over me as she called out my name. Relief coursed through me, a sweet, warm feeling that I had so desperately needed. "Sarah, are you okay?" I ran to meet her at the door, my eyes darting towards the street, where the darkness itself seemed to hold its breath. "I'm fine. You got here just in time. I don't know what's going on," I said, my voice trembling. Emily, a woman of practicality and strength, took in the scene, her eyes sharp. She scanned the street, her gaze sweeping over the empty sidewalk. A frown creased her brow. "Nothing looks out of place," she said, relief evident in her voice. "Maybe it was just a prank. You know kids these days." I shook my head, my heart still pounding in my chest. "I don't know, Emily. It felt wrong. Like something else was out there, watching us." Emily, ever the rational one, shrugged it off. "It was probably just a drunk guy, or some kids. Don't worry about it, okay? Let's just try to forget about it." And so we did. We sat down, drank some tea, and tried to laugh off the bizarre events. But the fear that had gripped me that night lingered, a subtle undercurrent in the comfortable silence. I knew, deep down, that I wouldn't forget what I had experienced. It felt like a warning, like the opening act of a play I didn't want to be a part of. The following weeks were a blur of normalcy. I tried to convince myself it was all just a bad dream, a figment of an overactive imagination. But the memory of the 3 rings, the disturbingly long pauses, the emptiness of the street, the feeling of being watched, it all haunted me. Then, it happened again. 2 weeks later, I was home alone, working on a project, the soft glow of the streetlight reflecting on my computer screen. The silence was broken by the familiar chime. Ding dong! Ding dong! Ding dong! The 3 rings, the unsettling pauses, the same cold fear that gripped me before. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. My fingers trembled as I reached for the phone, but before I could dial Emily's number, the ringing stopped. I held my breath, every nerve ending alight with anticipation. Then, a new sound. A low, guttural growl. It seemed to come from outside, from the street, a sound that made the hair on my neck stand on end. I didn't know what to do, where to look. My mind was filled with a chaotic jumble of fear and confusion. This time, however, I didn't wait for Emily to come. I grabbed my keys and rushed downstairs, ignoring the primal fear that screamed at me to stay inside. I had to see what was happening. I had to confront whatever was out there. I threw open the front door, the cold night air rushing in to meet me. The street was empty, bathed in the eerie glow of the streetlights. I held my breath, my eyes scanning the shadows, searching for the source of the growl. Nothing. A shiver ran down my spine. It was the same feeling I had experienced before, the sense of something unseen, something lurking in the darkness, watching me. As I stood there, fear coursing through me, I noticed something at the edge of the streetlight's glow. A small, dark figure, hunched over, its back to me. It was impossible to make out any features, but the presence was undeniable. I could feel its gaze, cold and penetrating, on the back of my neck. I took a step back, my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a drunk guy or some kids. This was something else entirely, something that left me feeling utterly powerless. I slammed the door shut, my hands shaking, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. But the feeling of being watched, of being hunted, didn't disappear. It lingered, a dark, suffocating presence that filled the room. I ran back to my apartment, my eyes darting around, searching for any sign of danger. But I saw nothing. I couldn't explain it, but I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I was not alone. Something, or someone, was out there. And I was its target. I had to get out of there. I packed a small bag, a few essentials, and my phone. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I had to leave. As I was about to leave, I stopped, my hand hovering over the door handle. I had a feeling, a deep, unsettling feeling, that I was making a mistake. Leaving my apartment would not solve the problem. It would only make it worse. I looked out the window at the street, the cold moonlight bathing it in an ethereal glow. It was then that I saw it. A dark figure standing in the middle of the street, its arms outstretched, its head tilted towards me. It was the same figure I had seen before, but closer now, clearer. It wasn't just a shadow. It was something tangible, something real. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move, unable to even scream. I could feel its gaze on me, penetrating my very soul. I knew, with a sickening certainty, that this was not the end. It was just the beginning. The figure started walking towards my apartment building, its movements slow and deliberate, its silence even more terrifying than any sound. I knew then that I had to do something, anything, to save myself. I ran to the phone, my fingers trembling as I dialed Emily's number. But the line was dead. Panic surged through me, leaving me breathless and weak. I looked back at the door, the figure now closer, its silhouette growing against the pale glow of the streetlight. There was only one thing left to do. I knew it. I had to hide. I pulled a dusty old blanket from the closet, threw it over my head, and crawled under the bed. The world outside seemed to shrink, the familiar sounds of my apartment muffled by the darkness beneath the bed. The figure stopped at the door, its looming presence filling the room, the silence a terrifying symphony of dread. I held my breath, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I could feel the presence of the figure, its cold, alien energy seeping into the space under the bed. I knew I was not safe, but I had to wait. I had to survive. Then, it started knocking. Knocking on the floorboards above, the gentle tap-tap-tap, punctuated by long, terrifying pauses. The same rhythm as the 3 rings. The same disturbing pauses. I knew then. I knew I was wrong. Hiding was not the answer. The one who knocks at night shall not be let in. The one who knocks at night shall not be let in. The one who knocks at night. The knocking stopped. The sound was replaced by a chilling silence, heavy and oppressive. I knew it was waiting, waiting for me to make a sound, waiting for me to betray my presence. I knew I was trapped. The first light of dawn crept in through the window, casting pale streaks of light across the floor. The silence was unbroken, but the pressure was overwhelming. It was time to leave. I had to get out of there. I had to escape the visitor in the night. I carefully crawled out from under the bed, the dust swirling around me. The silence was still there, but the pressure seemed to have lessened, as if the visitor had retreated. I didn't dare look for it. I just ran. I ran out of my apartment, down the stairs, and into the street. The sun was starting to rise, its pale light illuminating the street, chasing away the shadows of the night. But the fear remained, a cold, heavy weight in my chest. I didn't look back, not even once. I just kept running until I reached a busy street, the noise and chaos a welcome relief from the oppressive silence of my apartment. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't go back. The visitor in the night was not a thing of nightmares, but a terrifying manifestation of reality. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that it would come for me again. The one who knocks at night shall not be let in. And I am running. In the realm of slumber, where the boundaries between reality and reverie blur, a haunting figure emerged. A stranger with piercing blue eyes and a chilling demeanor, he became a constant presence in my dreams. His presence, at first subtle, gradually intensified, leaving me with a sense of unease that lingered long after I awoke. Night after night, his visits grew more frequent and more invasive. He would whisper cryptic messages in my ear, his voice a menacing murmur that sent shivers down my spine. He would stand at the foot of my bed, his eyes glowing ominously in the darkness. I would thrash and scream, but my pleas for help would be met with an eerie silence. As the days turned into nights, my waking life began to intertwine with my haunted dreams. I would catch glimpses of him out of the corner of my eye, a brief flicker of movement that would disappear as quickly as it had come. A sense of paranoia gripped me, as if I were constantly being watched, hunted by an unseen presence. One ordinary afternoon, as I sat alone in my apartment, I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. The hair on my arms stood on end, and a primal instinct screamed at me to flee. I glanced up, and there he was, standing in the doorway. His appearance was as chilling in reality as it had been in my dreams. His eyes, once a vibrant blue, were now a dull, lifeless gray. His face was pale and drawn, his features contorted into a sinister grin. It was as if the creature from my nightmares had manifested itself in the flesh. Fear paralyzed me as he stepped closer, his movements slow and deliberate. His icy breath sent shivers through my body, and I could taste the metallic tang of blood in the air. A guttural growl escaped his lips, a sound that sent a surge of terror coursing through me. I stumbled backward, desperate to escape his clutches. But he was too quick. He grabbed my arm with an iron grip, his skin cold and clammy. I struggled to break free, but his grip was unyielding. He dragged me towards the doorway, his strength astonishing. As we approached the threshold, I noticed something peculiar. The hallway outside my apartment was pitch black, as if enveloped by an impenetrable darkness. Panic surged through me as I realized the true extent of my predicament. He pulled me through the doorway and into the abyss. The darkness swallowed us whole, enveloping us in a suffocating blanket of despair. I could feel his breath on my neck, his cold fingers caressing my skin. I screamed for help, but my voice was swallowed by the void. We stumbled through the darkness, the sound of our footsteps echoing through the unknown. Fear consumed me, a primal terror that threatened to shatter my sanity. I could feel his presence closing in on me, his intentions as sinister as the darkness itself. Suddenly, I felt a sharp pain in my arm. I looked down and saw blood seeping from a deep wound. The realization struck me like a bolt of lightning. He was trying to kill me. Adrenaline surged through me, and I fought back with all my might. I kicked and screamed, desperate to escape his grasp. But he was relentless, his strength far surpassing mine. As my resistance waned, I could feel his cold lips against my ear. "You cannot escape me," he whispered, his voice a chilling caress. "You are mine now." A wave of despair washed over me as I realized the futility of my efforts. The darkness was closing in, and there was nowhere left to run. He lifted me off my feet and carried me further into the void. I could feel my body growing heavy, my consciousness slipping away. As darkness consumed me, I heard his final words echo through the abyss. "Your nightmares have only just begun." I awoke in a cold sweat, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. My apartment was bathed in the soft glow of dawn, but the terror of the night lingered in every corner. I was no longer safe in my own home, no longer safe in my own mind. The strange man from my dreams had become a reality, a living nightmare that haunted my every waking moment. I knew that I could not rest until I had faced him, until I had defeated the darkness that threatened to consume me. With newfound determination, I set out to uncover the truth behind the man from my dreams. I delved into my past, searching for any clues that could lead me to his identity. I visited old friends and family, hoping to find someone who could shed light on this sinister figure. As I pieced together the fragments of my memory, a chilling realization dawned upon me. The man from my dreams was not a stranger at all. He was someone I had known and trusted, someone who had betrayed me in the most unspeakable way. It was my former lover, a man I had once believed to be the love of my life. Driven by a thirst for revenge, he had orchestrated this elaborate nightmare to punish me for leaving him. Armed with this newfound knowledge, I confronted him. I summoned all my courage and faced him down, determined to bring an end to his reign of terror. In a tense and terrifying showdown, I revealed his true identity to the world. The mask of innocence he had worn for so long shattered, exposing the darkness that had always lurked beneath the surface. Betrayal turned to rage as he lunged at me, determined to silence me once and for all. But I was prepared for him this time. I fought back with all my strength, fueled by a burning desire to protect myself and those I loved. In a final, desperate act, I plunged a knife into his chest. As he lay dying at my feet, I felt a sense of liberation. The nightmare was over, and I had triumphed over the darkness that had threatened to consume me. But even though I had defeated the man from my dreams, the scars of his betrayal remained. The memory of his cold eyes and chilling words would forever haunt me, a reminder of the fragility of human nature and the darkness that can lurk in the hearts of those we trust. And so, I emerged from the abyss, a survivor of a nightmare that had threatened to destroy me. I had faced my fears and emerged victorious, but the echoes of the darkness would forever linger in my soul. I was at the airport baggage claim, the air thick with the smell of stale coffee and sweat, the drone of announcements a constant hum in my ears. My flight had been delayed, and the wait was testing my patience. I slumped onto one of the worn leather benches, idly watching the carousel churn, its slow rotation spitting out suitcases like a mechanical beast. That's when she approached me. She was young, maybe early 20s, with a gaunt face framed by a mess of blonde curls. She held a small, worn leather purse clutched tightly in her hand, her eyes darting around nervously. "Excuse me," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Could you watch my bag for me? Just for a minute? I need to use the bathroom." She pointed towards a large, dark gray-green suitcase resting on the ground beside her. It was one of those big clamshell ones with sturdy fabric around the zipper, a lacy ribbon tied on the handle, and no labels at all. Not even a flight barcode sticker. I hesitated for a moment, not wanting to get involved. It felt like a strange request, and something about her demeanor made my gut churn. But she looked so desperate, so anxious. "Promise you'll keep this for me until I get back?" she said, her voice trembling slightly. I promised her I'd look after it, laughing a little because she seemed so anxious, as if she was worried I'd abandon it and leave it for someone to steal. "Thank you," she said, her voice almost a sigh of relief. "I'll be right back." She hurried towards the restrooms, disappearing into the sea of people. I sat there, watching the carousel, the suitcase at my feet. It was heavy, oddly heavy for its size. I tried to lift it, but it wouldn't budge. I felt a prickling sensation on the back of my neck, an unease that had nothing to do with the delay and everything to do with this suitcase and the woman who left it with me. 10 minutes passed. 15. 20. I started questioning my decision. Maybe she had gotten caught in a line, or maybe she had just left. The thought chilled me. The woman had seemed genuinely frantic, and now she was gone. I tried to ignore the growing unease, but the suitcase felt like a weight on my conscience. I kept looking around, hoping to spot her, but she was nowhere to be seen. 30 minutes passed. I was starting to feel ridiculous. I looked around for an airport employee, but they were all busy helping passengers. I decided to leave the suitcase with the rest of the unclaimed luggage, figuring it would find its way to her eventually. I took my own suitcase, walked out of the airport, and into the cool night air. When I got home, the suitcase was there in the entryway. I stared at it, my jaw slack. My key still hung on its hook, untouched, the lock on my front door still intact. I hadn't seen anyone bring it in. Weird, right? I muttered to myself, my voice echoing eerily in the quiet house. How did it get here? Vague thoughts flitted through my head that the airport somehow delivered it. Maybe they saw me sitting with it, and assumed it was mine. But a strange, cold dread began to gnaw at me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, terribly wrong. I dragged the suitcase inside and placed it in the corner of my living room. It sat there, a hulking, silent sentinel, its presence making the air feel thick and heavy. I tried to ignore it, but the suitcase fascinated me. It was heavy, almost impossibly heavy for its size. I pictured it being carried, rolled, dragged. And the woman, her frantic eyes, her desperate plea. Who was she? What was in that suitcase? I sat on the couch, trying to convince myself it was all just a strange coincidence, a minor inconvenience. I tried to relax, but the suitcase was a constant presence, its dark silhouette a shadow hanging over my thoughts. Finally, I couldn't bear the tension anymore. I had to open it. I had to know what was inside. I unzipped the suitcase, pulling the zipper slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. The stale, musty smell of old fabrics hit me, a smell that felt oddly familiar, vaguely unsettling. Inside, nestled in a bed of soft, gray fabric, was a stack of leather-bound journals. I pulled one out, its pages brittle and yellowed. The writing inside was neat and precise, in a language I didn't recognize. It was a cursive script, elegant and flowing, but the words were foreign, like a code I couldn't decipher. I skimmed through the pages, trying to find a clue, a hint of the woman's identity, the reason she needed me to watch her bag. But the script remained indecipherable, a frustratingly beautiful mystery. As I flipped through the pages, my fingers brushed against something hard, bound inside the journal's pages. I carefully pulled it out, my heart skipping a beat. It was a small, silver locket, engraved with a delicate symbol, a circle with a single, sharp point at the top. I stared at the symbol, a shiver running down my spine. I recognized it. I had seen it before, on a website about ancient symbols, a website about demonic rituals. The blood drained from my face. I remembered the woman's frantic eyes, her desperate plea. She wasn't just trying to protect her luggage. She was trying to protect me. I slammed the locket back inside the journal, my fear rising with every passing second. The suitcase, the woman, the mysterious symbols, the unnerving feeling that something was terribly wrong, it all came together in a terrifying, chilling epiphany. I was in danger. I had to find the woman. I had to tell her what I had found. I had to get away from this suitcase, from this symbol, from this, whatever it was. I quickly pulled out my phone, my fingers shaking as I scrolled through my contacts. I had to call someone, anyone. But there was no one I could trust, no one I could tell. And then, a surge of adrenaline coursed through me. I knew what I had to do. I had to find her. I grabbed my coat, my mind racing. I didn't know where to start, but I knew I had to act fast. I had to get out of my house, get away from this cursed suitcase. I rushed out the door, the weight of the suitcase's contents, the gravity of the situation, pressing down on me like a physical burden. The night air was cool and crisp, but my skin felt clammy, my heart pounding in my chest. I looked back at my house, the faint light from the street lamp casting a long dark shadow. The suitcase, a silent sentinel, stood in the corner of my living room, an unwelcome guest in my home. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I had to keep moving. I ran down the street, desperate to escape the encroaching darkness, the terrifying truth I had unearthed. The suitcase, the woman, the symbol, they were all connected in ways I couldn't even begin to comprehend. But one thing was clear: this was not a simple act of kindness. This was something far more sinister, something that threatened not only my safety but my very soul. I kept running, the suitcase a constant burden, a chilling reminder of the dangerous path I had unwittingly stepped onto. The night stretched out before me, a dark and mysterious landscape, an unknown territory filled with shadows and secrets. And in the heart of that darkness, a single, sharp point gleamed, a symbol of the unknown, a symbol of something ancient and evil. I ran, my breath ragged, my heart pounding, my mind filled with questions, haunted by the image of the woman's frantic eyes, the promise I had been foolish enough to make. It was a promise I would never be able to keep. And in the depths of the night, as I ran further and further away from the suitcase, from the symbol, from the woman who had entrusted me with something I could never have imagined, I realized that I was no longer running from the danger. I was running from myself. The cold, unforgiving grip of night had enveloped the city when I stumbled through the unlocked door of my apartment. The air was heavy with an oppressive silence, broken only by the soft whirring of the refrigerator and the distant hum of traffic. I had been working late again, the endless cycle of overtime hours consuming my life, leaving me perpetually exhausted and disconnected from everything outside the sterile walls of the hospital. As I wearily made my way towards my bedroom, a glimmer of something unusual caught my eye. A small, rectangular parcel lay abandoned on the floor in the dim light of the hallway. Curiosity got the better of me, and I reached down to pick it up. It was wrapped in plain brown paper, sealed with a strip of unremarkable tape. With trembling hands I tore it open. A cold shock ran through me as my gaze fell upon the gruesome contents. It was a finger, severed cleanly at the first knuckle. The skin was pale and lifeless, the nail neatly manicured. A wave of nausea washed over me as I realized the horrifying truth: this was the finger of my fiancée, Anya. Panic surged through my veins like wildfire. My mind raced, trying to make sense of this macabre discovery. I had left her sleeping peacefully in our bed just hours before. How could she be here now, dismembered and lifeless? Fear propelled me forward as I stumbled into the bedroom. Anya was gone. The bed was empty, the sheets undisturbed. A sense of dread washed over me as I frantically searched the apartment, my heart pounding in my chest like a war drum. In a desperate attempt to find some semblance of reason in this nightmare, I frantically dialed Anya's number. It rang once, twice, then went straight to voicemail. I left a message, my voice trembling with fear and desperation, begging her to call me back. As the minutes turned into hours, the silence in my apartment became deafening. I could feel my sanity slipping away as my thoughts spiraled into a vortex of paranoia and terror. I imagined Anya lying cold and lifeless somewhere, her beautiful body violated by an unknown assailant. Just when I thought I couldn't bear the uncertainty any longer, I remembered something that sent a chill down my spine. A few weeks earlier, I had caught Anya cheating on me. In a fit of rage, I had confronted her, accusing her of infidelity. She had denied it vehemently, but I knew she was lying. Driven by a morbid curiosity, I searched my memory for the details of our confrontation. It was then that I recalled a moment of blind fury, when I had seized Anya's hand and twisted it until I heard a sickening snap. In my rage, I had broken her finger. Anya had pleaded with me to forgive her, promising it would never happen again. I had refused to listen, and I had sent her away. Now, looking at the severed finger lying on my desk, I realized the true extent of my actions. I had not only broken her finger, but I had also broken her trust. As the night wore on, the guilt and horror that consumed me became unbearable. I knew I had to do something, anything, to atone for my sins. I called the police and confessed everything. I told them about the finger, about Anya's infidelity, and about the moment of madness when I had broken her finger. The police were skeptical at first, but they eventually agreed to investigate. They searched my apartment and found no trace of Anya, but they did confirm that the finger belonged to her. They also discovered that she had filed a restraining order against me just hours before her disappearance. I was arrested and charged with assault and battery, but the police could not hold me without evidence of Anya's death. I was released on bail, but I knew I had lost everything. Anya was gone, and I was responsible for her disappearance. In the weeks and months that followed, I descended into a pit of despair. I lost my job, my friends abandoned me, and I became a recluse, haunted by the guilt of my actions. I spent every waking moment consumed by remorse and terror, knowing that I had played a role in Anya's disappearance. One night, as I lay in bed, tormented by nightmares, I heard a knock at the door. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew instinctively that this was it, that Anya had finally returned to haunt me. With trembling hands I crept towards the door and slowly opened it. There, standing in the dim light of the hallway, was Anya. She looked different than I remembered. Her face was pale and gaunt, her eyes were dull and lifeless. "Anya," I whispered, my voice barely a croak. "Is it really you?" She didn't answer, but simply stepped inside the apartment and closed the door behind her. I watched in horror as she walked towards me, her movements slow and deliberate. "Anya," I pleaded, "what do you want?" She stopped in front of me and stared into my eyes. Her gaze was cold and unforgiving, like the blade of a knife. "I want revenge," she whispered. I never really believed in ghosts. I thought they were just stories, things people talked about to spook each other or get a laugh around a campfire. But after what happened to me, I'm not so sure anymore. I don't think I'll ever be the same. It all started when I moved into this old apartment on the edge of town. I needed a place that was cheap and close to work, and this building fit the bill. It was old, maybe from the 1950s, with creaky wooden floors and peeling wallpaper, but it had character. The landlord seemed okay, and the rent was right. It felt like the perfect fit, a bit worn around the edges but livable. The apartment itself was small, a single bedroom with a cramped kitchen and a bathroom that felt like a walk-in closet. But it had a big, old bay window that looked out onto the street, and a balcony with rickety railings that promised a view of the city lights. I spent my first few weeks settling in, unpacking boxes and trying to make the place feel like home. The old furniture I'd picked up at a flea market added a touch of nostalgia, and I hung up a few framed prints from my travels to make the walls less bare. It wasn't much, but it was mine. One night, I was reading in bed when I heard a noise from the kitchen. I figured it was the pipes. The building was old and prone to strange noises. Still, I got up and went to investigate. The kitchen was dark, and the only light came from the faint glow of the street lamp outside my window. As I stepped closer, I heard a thud, like something had fallen. My heart started to pound. "Hello?" I called out, feeling foolish. Silence. I flicked on the light switch, but nothing happened. I tried again, harder, and finally the light flickered on, revealing the empty kitchen. Nothing had fallen, there was no sign of anything out of place. I checked the fridge, the cabinets, even under the sink, but nothing. The only thing that seemed different was a faint, musty smell that wasn't there before. Maybe it was just the wind, I said to myself, trying to convince myself it was nothing. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I went back to bed, but I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind outside my window sent shivers down my spine. Finally, exhausted, I fell asleep, only to be awakened by a strange sensation. It was like someone was watching me, their gaze cold and heavy on my back. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, but saw nothing. The next day, I shrugged it off as a bad dream. But the following night, it happened again. This time, I was sure it wasn't just my imagination. I was sitting at my desk, working on a project, when I heard the sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from the bedroom. I froze, listening intently. The footsteps stopped just outside my door. I could feel a presence in the room, something unseen watching me. Fear gripped me, a cold, icy hand squeezing my heart. I wanted to run, scream, but I couldn't move. I just sat there, paralyzed with terror, as the footsteps retreated slowly down the hallway. My mind raced, trying to explain what I'd heard. The landlord had mentioned the previous tenant had been a recluse, an elderly woman who had passed away alone. I had dismissed his words as just a spooky anecdote, but now, my mind refused to reject the possibility that perhaps the woman's ghost remained in the apartment. That night I couldn't sleep. I stayed up, clutching a rusty old candlestick from my flea market haul, fearing every creak and groan of the aging building. I was convinced that something was in the apartment with me, something unseen and malevolent. The following days were filled with paranoia. I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, convinced that I was being watched. I started noticing things that seemed out of place: a cold spot in the living room, a flickering light in the hallway, a faint whisper of a voice in the dead of night. Every event, no matter how mundane, was tainted with the fear of the unseen. One night, the fear culminated in a terrifying encounter. I was preparing dinner, the scent of garlic and onions filling the small kitchen. Suddenly, I heard a sound from the living room, a chilling, mournful wail. It was a sound that seemed to come from deep within the walls, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. I froze, the knife in my hand trembling. Slowly, I turned towards the living room, heart pounding in my chest. The room was dark, the only light coming from the street lamp outside my window. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, listening, but the sound was gone. Then I saw it. A faint, shimmering figure, almost translucent, stood in the doorway leading to the bedroom. It was a woman, tall and slender, shrouded in a long, flowing gown. Her face was obscured by shadows, but I could make out the faint outline of a sorrowful expression. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a deep, penetrating sadness. I screamed, dropping the knife to the floor with a metallic clang. The figure seemed to flinch at the sound, then began to fade, dissolving into the shadows like a wisp of smoke. I stumbled back, my heart pounding against my ribs like a drum. My legs felt like lead, but I managed to stumble into the bedroom, locking the door behind me. I hunched under the blankets, clutching the candlestick for dear life, my mind reeling from what I had just seen. Who was she? How could I explain this? Was it really a ghost? As the hours passed, the fear finally gave way to a strange sense of calm. I realized that the ghost, if that's what it was, had not harmed me. It had simply appeared, looked at me, and then vanished. It felt more like a lost soul, seeking comfort or perhaps understanding, than a malevolent entity. With the arrival of dawn, I found myself strangely relieved. The fear had not entirely vanished, but it had been replaced by a sense of curiosity. I was no longer afraid of the ghost, but rather fascinated by it. I wanted to understand who it was, why it was here, what it was trying to tell me. I spent the next few days researching the history of the building, scouring old newspapers and city records. I learned that the previous tenant, the elderly woman who had died in the apartment, had been a talented pianist. She had apparently lived a lonely life, her days filled with music and memories. One night, I sat at my piano, a dusty old instrument I had found abandoned in the attic, and played a simple melody. As I played, I felt a strange sensation, a warmth spreading through the room. I looked up, and there, standing in the doorway to the bedroom, was the figure of the woman, her face no longer obscured by shadows. She seemed to be smiling, a hint of joy flickering in her eyes. Then, as quickly as she appeared, she vanished. But I was no longer afraid. I knew that the ghost wasn't a threat, but rather a presence that wished to be understood, a soul seeking solace. I continued to play the piano every night, filling the apartment with music. With each note, I felt the presence of the woman grow stronger, the warmth in the room increasing. I imagined her spirit finding peace in the music, her sorrow fading away. I never saw the ghost again, but I knew she was still there, watching, listening, finding solace in the music that filled the old apartment. And I, in turn, found a strange sense of comfort in her presence. It was as if she had become a part of the place, a silent but benevolent companion. The fear I had felt that first night had transformed into something else, a quiet respect, a sense of shared space. The apartment was no longer just a place to sleep and eat, it was a place where a story had been told, a place where a ghost had found peace. And I, though not entirely sure how, felt connected to it all, forever changed by the encounter. I still live in the old apartment, and sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I hear a faint, mournful wail coming from the walls. But now, it doesn't frighten me. Instead, it reminds me of the night I faced something unexplainable, something that changed my understanding of the world and brought me face to face with the mysterious and the unknown. And though the secrets of the past remain shrouded in mystery, I have found peace in the presence of a ghost who has become my silent companion. When we first moved into our new home, everything seemed perfect. It was an old Victorian house, the kind you'd see on a postcard, charmingly eerie but still inviting. My husband, Mark, and I were excited to raise our 5-year-old daughter, Emily, in a place with so much character and history. The first few weeks were blissful. Emily loved her new room, especially the built-in bookshelf filled with dusty old books left by the previous owners. Everything was fine until one night, Emily came into our room around 3 a.m., clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Mommy, Mommy," she whispered, her voice tight with fear. "There's a man in my room." Mark and I exchanged worried glances. We tried to reassure Emily, telling her it was just a bad dream. But as we tucked her back into bed, her small hand gripped mine, her eyes wide. "He's in the walls, Mommy," she said, her voice trembling. "He's watching me." We dismissed it as a child's imagination. It was just a new house, new sounds, and a child's active mind. However, Emily's insistent whispers about the man in the walls continued, growing more frequent and more disturbing. "He's making noises, Mommy. He's tapping and whispering." We started hearing things too. Late at night, the soft thud of something heavy against the wall in Emily's room. Whispers that seemed to come from the very air around us. We chalked it up to the old house settling, creaking pipes, the wind. But the fear in Emily's eyes was impossible to ignore. One day, I was cleaning Emily's room, dusting the old bookshelf. Her eyes followed me, her face pale. "Don't touch those books, Mommy," she begged, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "He doesn't like it when you touch them." Puzzled, I asked her, "Who doesn't like it, honey?" She looked at me, her eyes wide, her voice barely a whisper. "The man in the walls, Mommy. He doesn't like it when you touch his books." Something about her words, the way she spoke, the way her eyes held an unnerving knowledge, sent chills down my spine. I decided to investigate the books, convinced there had to be some logical explanation. The books were mostly old, worn, and seemingly unremarkable. One, however, caught my eye. It was smaller than the others, bound in dark leather, with a cryptic inscription in faded ink. "The Watcher in the Walls." I opened it, expecting to find a dusty collection of poems or Victorian Gothic tales, but my breath hitched. The book was empty. Not a single page, not a single word. Just an empty, hollow space, like a silent echo of a story never written. That night, the noises started again. Louder, more insistent, and closer. We could hear the scratching, the tapping, and faint whispers coming from the wall right behind Emily's bed. Mark and I were terrified. We were starting to believe what Emily had been telling us. There was something in the walls, something watching us. We decided to consult a specialist. We found a woman named Dr. Eleanor Davies, known for her expertise in parapsychology. She arrived at our home, a woman with sharp green eyes and a calm demeanor that belied the unsettling nature of her work. Dr. Davies listened intently as we recounted Emily's stories and the strange occurrences we had witnessed. She then took Emily aside, talking to her gently, asking her about her experiences. Emily, who had been withdrawn and quiet since the noises began, suddenly became animated. She started talking about a man in the walls, a man who wore a hat and carried a lantern. She described him in detail, his pale, gaunt face, his deep, hollow eyes, his worn clothes that smelled of dust and decay. Dr. Davies examined the books in Emily's room, focusing on the empty one. The Watcher in the Walls. She held it in her hands, her eyes narrowed. "This is not a normal book," she said, her voice low. "It is a conduit, a bridge between this world and something else." She explained that the man Emily described, the man in the walls, was not a ghost, not an earthly spirit. He was an entity, a being from another dimension, trapped here, tethered to this house, and to the empty book. He was feeding off of our fear, our energy, growing stronger with each passing day. Dr. Davies advised us to leave the house immediately. She warned that the entity was becoming increasingly powerful, fueled by our fear and Emily's connection to him. We packed our belongings, leaving the house in a state of panic. As we drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The old Victorian house stood silhouetted against the fading light, a dark, enigmatic figure in the landscape. We found a new home, a small, modern apartment in a bustling city. Emily was happy there, her fear of the man in the walls receding. But the experience had left its mark on us, a lingering chill in our hearts, a shadow in our memories. For months we lived in peace. Then one day, Emily came home from school, her face pale, her eyes wide with a familiar terror. "Mommy," she whispered, "the man, he's here." I looked at her, my heart sinking, and I saw it, the same fear, the same knowledge in her eyes. The man in the walls, the Watcher, the entity from another dimension, was no longer trapped in the dusty old Victorian house. He was here, in our new home, in this bustling city, watching us. This time, however, we weren't alone. Dr. Davies had been right. The entity was feeding off our fear, growing stronger, crossing dimensions, drawing closer. We had to fight back. We contacted Dr. Davies, who arrived with a team of specialists, all experts in their own fields, a priest, a shaman, a physicist, even a linguist. They gathered in our living room, their faces grave, their eyes filled with a solemn determination. The priest, a man with gentle eyes and a weathered face, explained that the entity was not evil, not demonic, but lost, desperate, searching for a way back to its own dimension. He believed the entity was drawn to Emily, sensing a connection with her, a way to bridge the gap between realms. Their plan was to create a countercurrent, a wave of positive energy, of love and compassion, to overwhelm the entity's negative energy, to guide it back to its own dimension. 4 days, we chanted, prayed, and meditated. We created a field of energy, a shield of light and love, surrounding our home, our city, our world. We focused on Emily, on her innocence, her purity, her ability to connect with the unseen. Then, one night, as we stood together, hands clasped, our hearts pounding with hope and fear, we felt it. A wave of energy, a surge of light, a shift in the air. The entity was leaving, retreating, fading back into its own dimension. The next morning, Emily woke up smiling, her eyes clear and bright, her fear gone. She told us about a man in the walls, a man who smiled at her, who whispered a word of gratitude before fading away. The experience had changed us, changed our lives. It had made us believe in the unseen, the unknown, the power of love and compassion. It had taught us that even in the darkest hours, even in the face of the most terrifying unknowns, there is always hope, always a way back to the light. The man in the walls, the Watcher, the entity from another dimension, is gone, but his presence lingers in our memories. He is a reminder that the world is a vast and mysterious place, full of wonders and terrors beyond our comprehension. But most importantly, he is a reminder that even in the face of the unknown, even in the face of our deepest fears, love and compassion have the power to heal, to guide, and to set us free.